Welcome to the Sports Trigger. I'm Jared with my co-host Travis.
Here to ignite your day.
Welcome back to the Sports Trigger, everyone. And today, Travis, is our day to bash on the NBA playoffs. It's not even fun to watch anymore. What about you? Did you like watching the early rounds of the NBA playoffs?
Not at all. Not at all. Even the finals, right? Even the finals were not that fun to watch, but that was probably the most watchable series of the entire playoffs, I think. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about how the playoffs should be broken down and whether they should be the top 16 records versus West and East. And initially I was against it, but after what happened this past year, I absolutely agree with that idea. What's your mindset on that?
I think we have to do something in terms of making it more watchable early on. And on top of that, the thing that really bothers me is, you have Mark Cuban coming out and saying, because of the Warriors, we're having to tank right now. We're having to kind of, give up. If we were in the East, we wouldn't be tanking. Well, the problem is, if you have a whole bunch of teams in the West do that, then, you're going to have some, it doesn't matter who's in, out 5 through 8 seed, they're probably not going to be that good because they're probably all taking on the same mentality. So you're just going to start having maybe 3 super teams, and the first, 2 series aren't even going to be watchable over in the West. Then over in the East, you're just going to have LeBron James because all the other talent has pretty much shifted over out West. And so why would you want to watch the East with no star power? So you have to figure out some type of balancing act that prevents teams from wanting to go into full-on tank mode and then making the first round series more competitive. Now, what do you do? Is the solution the top 16 seeds? Maybe. I don't know if that exactly cures everything because you're always going to have, last 4 or 5 teams in that probably aren't amazing. But what's your stance? Like, why do you think the top 16 seeds would cure it? Or maybe not cure it, but just make it better?
Yeah, I think now we're in a time of change. Rules keep changing. There's so many removing parts that fuel the NBA, especially all other sports as well, but especially the NBA and viewership, right? And I look back at it, and since 2000, 12 times the NBA champion was a Western Conference team. That's pretty dominant, right?
Yeah.
That's well over 50%, and I'm not as big as the East versus West during the regular season in terms of win percentage, but looking at it since 2000 as well, the East has only beaten the West once as far as win percentage against the other conference, which that's pretty amazing. But like I said, I don't play as far into that as others may. But I think for the current time, kind of like you said, it would be a temporary fix, not a permanent fix. But I think my question would be, how many East teams would make the playoffs? What, maybe looking at 3 or 4 currently? I mean, you have the Cavaliers, you have the Wizards, you have the Celtics, maybe one more. The talent's gone over
Raptors,
to the West.
Maybe,
maybe the Raptors. It's so jumbled up on the Western side that even if the Eastern teams that do make it, I think it would make it exciting to see how far those Eastern teams make it. I think that would make it a little bit more interesting, which the Eastern side was probably more enjoyable to watch as far as how the series went. Not everyone was getting swept left and right unless you're playing the Cavaliers, but I definitely think it would bring maybe more viewership or people who kind of stopped watching recently because of the domination of the West back to the game and actually find it more interesting than what it's been recently.
Yeah, it would be interesting because you get this East versus West mantra early on in the playoffs, which I think would absolutely be very, very entertaining. Getting a lot of the people from the East saying, okay, well, we're going to get behind Washington because, we want some Eastern Conference pride and to show like, hey, it doesn't matter where you're playing, we're tough, right? And actually, I think it would be a very entertaining opening round series if it was the Wizards versus Golden State. Like, how fun would that be to see John Wall just running up and down the floor and seeing if Curry or Thompson them can guard him? Like, that would have been a fun series. I would have think, Toronto, Boston, those guys could have been fun to watch play, maybe like a Utah or one of those teams. But I'm trying to think, Cleveland probably would have come in at a 4 seed or a 5 seed, something like that. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, probably something along those lines.
I think the one problem though you have with the record is if you do the top 16 seeds, then you almost need to go just to a completely mixed schedule, because a lot of people would say, well, Cleveland just plays these crap, Eastern Conference teams, where Golden State, if they have to play a majority of their games against all the Western Conference foes, then the records could start to get skewed a little bit. And so I think in terms of seeding and all fairness, just based on the way the balance is right now, you have to go to a complete mixed schedule. If you did that, then I think you would get really accurate seedings compared to what you might if they were just sticking to the normal East-West, then mix it up at the end. But I don't know if that's the actual answer though, in terms of competitiveness. And getting a better playoff.
Long term, definitely doesn't seem like that would be a good fix. But with all things, there's going to be temporary fixes, and with those temporary fixes, multiple things are going to have to change. So even if it was for say 10 years, I think that would be fine, and that gives the NBA commissioner some time to think, okay, what's best for the league and how can we make this enjoyable long term and most fair to all the different franchises versus, as you stated earlier, they'll get a couple super teams and then it's still going to be the same case as it is these days, to where those teams are going to just run through the playoffs.
Right, and I've also thought about one other way, take the top 16 teams, the first 4 or whatever, how it'd work out in the branch, get a bye. And then the other teams play one and done to get to those other 4 teams with the bye. So it's just one game. You get to move on if you win. If you lose, you're out. And then as you get to the final 4 teams who had the bye, then you could have a best of 3. And then you have the best of 3 with those, the worst teams or whatever. And that'd make it a little more interesting, because the better team's probably still going to win a best of 3 series, right, against one of those teams coming through. And then as you move on through the playoffs, to the actual championship, you move it down to a best of 5. But I don't think they'll ever do that just in terms of money making, because you saw the whole stats on, I think it was from Golden State, how much they were losing just by themselves by not playing a Game 7. So I think, when it's all said and done, it's about money, and games having the East and the West split off. Apparently the NBA makes more money that way, but I don't know. I think something definitely has to be done, though, and it'll be interesting to see what Adam Silver comes up with. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining up with us today and another episode on the Sports Trigger. This is Travis and Jared signing out.